Hello, Fenna.
Hello, David.
Yeah, nice to actually speak. I know we've been communicating quite a bit over Twitter.
Mhm.
And then a few weeks ago, I can't remember, was it you or me who came up with the idea of the article? I can't remember.
It was sort of you who invited me, but it was prompted by me responding to your Twitter.
Oh, yeah.
It was you were doing the James Bond 31 day challenge.
Yes,
And,
that's
and
it.
and the question was, name the top four sexiest
Mm,
characters in the Bond
mm,
films. And my
that's it.
response to that was, that challenge would have been too challenging for me. I couldn't tell you.
So yeah, and then didn't we end up having a conversation about Paloma as well, and to what extent she might be asexually coded, and didn't
Yeah,
we kind of go from
little.
there? So
Yeah, sort of.
let's just back up for a second then, because if people haven't read the article yet, this will kind of be a nice introduction. Or if people have read the article, your brilliant article, I absolutely loved putting that on the website and choosing in fact, I haven't shown you the images I've chosen for it yet, but hopefully you approve of my selections. But
I'm sure I will.
yeah, it was really great. So if you have read the article, this is kind of like a nice extra, a bit more detail. And if you've not read the article, I definitely think you can go and read it after this. Although we are going to kind of talk about some of the main points from the article. So yeah, just to back up for a second. So I'm not sure. Yeah, I haven't had obviously the same experiences as yourself growing up. I don't identify anywhere on the asexual spectrum, and we'll get to that in a
Mm-hmm.
minute. But I did have an interesting encounter with some Bond fans online recently who said that it was a very, very polite gentleman said to me during a video call, said, David, as a gay man, what do you get out of James Bond? Because the main thing that I get out of James Bond is looking at the attractive women. And, he didn't mean it offensively at all. He was genuinely interested
Mm.
in what I got out of James Bond, because I, most of the time, don't find women attractive. And my answer to that basically was, I don't really find most of the men attractive in Bond, to be perfectly honest. That's not the main thing that I go into a Bond film for. There's
Mm-hmm.
loads more to Bond than just sex appeal. So is that a kind of perspective that you can sort of relate to as well?
Absolutely. I mean, yes, as an asexual person, I don't find anyone attractive as well in the Bond films. So it was always about I don't know, the heroics, the villains with their fantastical plots, the travelogue, the explosions, the wit, the style. There are so many other things to like about the Bond world. So yeah, sex doesn't. I mean, it's there obviously,
Yeah.
but that's not why I like it.
And I think it's really important, obviously that my aim with License to Queer is to present as many different perspectives on Bond as possible. And I do sometimes find that the discourse is still sort of dominated, particularly by men, straight men, and it's kind of ogling all the girls, and that's fine. But,
Mm.
there's just so much more to Bond than just that, I think. So I was fascinated to find out kind of more about your perspective on Bond, particularly as, like me, you are a massive fan of Tomorrow Never Dies. So
Yes.
we're going to try not to turn this into just like a love letter to Tomorrow Never Dies. But I know you've read my queer review of Tomorrow Never Dies recently, so we can talk about that. Before we kind
Yeah.
of get into that, can you just kind of share to listeners a bit about yourself?
Sure. Well, I mean, what is there to say? I'm from Amsterdam. I'm born and raised.
Classic Bond location.
Classic Bond location. Although I must confess, I have never tried to find the Tiffany Case apartment.
Oh, that'd be the
I
first thing I
know.
do.
Yes, I don't know. I probably passed it cycling through the city as you do here, but I've never actually tried to find it. I don't know.
Have you been over
Maybe
the
I
Skinny
should.
Bridge?
Yes, of course. I've seen the Skinny Bridge. Yeah.
Well, I haven't been to Amsterdam yet, but I'm actually coming for the first time later this year, as long as COVID and everything else doesn't get in the way. So I'm really looking for, I think I've promised my husband, because we're only there for the day, I've promised my husband we're not going to just do the Diamonds Are Forever location list. Although I'm definitely going to try and tick off a couple.
Of course, yeah. Of course. Well, yeah, I've been a Bond fan for many, many years, since I saw Tomorrow Never Dies on the big screen when I was 12 years old. And that was just instantly, I went to the video store and rented the GoldenEye VHS the very next day. And I was just, that was it for me. I was obsessed with Bond from that moment on.
Brilliant.
Started watching all the movies, reading the books, eventually writing fan fiction. Yeah, it was great.
Do you think Tomorrow Never Dies stands out because it was the first one, or does it still hold up in your estimation now you've seen the other Bond films?
I mean, that's hard to say, isn't it? You're always going to be biased about your first Bond film, but yeah, I still think it holds up pretty well. I still like it. Yeah, it's good. It's popcorn entertainment, really.
Yeah, exactly. And I know a lot of people don't really like Tomorrow Never Dies very much, but it wasn't the first one I saw at the cinema. It was probably the second one I saw at the cinema, but I'd seen all the others up until that point. But it's definitely the one, that and View to a Kill are the ones that if my husband and I just want to sit there and watch a Bond film, we know we're going to agree on one that we really like. It's that one, or as I say, View to a Kill. And interestingly, one of your favorite parts of that, this is a spoiler if you haven't read the article yet, so you might want to read the article, because this is one of the three moments in Fenna's article where I laugh out loud when I read it. And that goes for when I read it the first time and when I was putting it on the website. And the first time I laugh out loud is when you turn to your friend who's like, isn't Pierce Brosnan attractive, and you're more interested in the amazing shot of the bazooka going through the window of the BMW in the car park.
Yes. Yeah? As a 12-year-old sitting in that cinema, I was like, that was awesome. Just, yeah, I loved it.
As a 39-year-old watching it at home, I still go, that was awesome. it doesn't get old.
Me too.
It's a really great moment, and it does have that wonderfully camp little flip from the bazooka guy straight afterwards. It's such a weird scene. It's so great. I love it to pieces. So most of your article is devoted to kind of explaining to people. There's a bit in there about explaining to people if they don't understand about asexuality before we get into some examples. So just in case people haven't read the article, could you just kind of give people a bit of a primer on what we mean by terms we've already used, like asexual and demisexual and the spectrum and all that sort of thing?
Yeah, I mean, it is hard to explain because asexuality means so many different things. It is an umbrella term. It is a spectrum, the asexual spectrum. And depending on whether you fall on that, your experience can differ. So in my case, I'm sort of halfway along the spectrum, I think you would say. I consider myself demisexual, which means that I can experience sexual attraction to other people, but it happens very rarely. It happens when I've known someone for a very long time and there's this sort of trust there, and I feel there's some kind of emotional connection there. So there's a joke about demisexual people, which goes, demisexual people only fall in love with their best friends, which, from my experience, that's not wrong. But yeah. And there's also gray sexual, which is similar, which is, you experience sexual attraction, but not very often. And then there's, completely asexual, which is just you don't experience sexual attraction, but you can still experience, you can have a libido, you can have the desire to have sex with people, you're just not attracted to them. It's very complex, but at its core, asexuality is a lack of attraction to other people. That's the best way to explain it, I think.
Yeah, that's really well explained. And I must admit, I learned a couple of things from your article as well, because although I've got a few friends in real life who identify on the asexual spectrum, I'll be honest, I sometimes feel kind of like I don't want to ask them too many questions, because I don't mind people asking me about gay stuff, but I know some people might feel a bit self-conscious because they're like, oh God, does that mean that's all we kind of see him as, sort of thing? Being gay is probably not the most interesting thing about me, but I know people are quite curious. So do you get people asking you lots of questions?
No, not really. I think no, people notice that I'm single. Maybe they're afraid to ask me if I'm happy that way or not. No, I don't get a lot of questions, but for all intents and purposes, I do seem happy. I am happy. So that's
great. But do you feel that a lot of people just don't understand asexuality?
Yeah, I think so. Whenever I do bring it up or explain it, they're like, well, isn't that just having standards, about who you want to sleep with, or they don't really understand it, or they just say, well, you haven't met the right person yet, something like that. That tends to happen a lot.
I've written about asexuality a little bit, and I have always run what I'm writing past kind of some asexual people to make sure I'm not putting my foot in it, because when you're not representing your own experience, you want to make sure that's the case. But there's so little research out there into asexuality. I always find it really difficult to find any kind of reference. So I don't know if you've ever come across any research into how prevalent asexuality is across society. I know I haven't.
No, I think it's about 1% of people in the world.
Oh, right.
But to be honest, I really didn't think a lot about asexuality before you invited me to write this article. So
oh wow.
I've also learned a lot over the past few weeks. So thank you for that.
Oh wow. No, I didn't know that. That's great. Okay. Hopefully it hasn't made you feel self-conscious or anything.
No. It's been eye-opening, really. Yeah.
Oh, that's great. So when I've been writing bits about asexual characters in Bond, there are a few direct references in Fleming, and there's quite a bit of what we call coding, which regular licensed to queer readers and listeners, we're really familiar with coding, where we don't state things explicitly, but you kind of read between the lines. And I know we're going to be talking about that in relation to a couple of characters in a minute. But a lot of time, if you were to say asexual Bond character to most people, I would imagine most people would go straight for Vargas from Thunderball. And I'm planning to use him as the cover image, actually, for the article. I found a really kind of amusing behind the scenes image of him with the what's it called, the harpoon sticking out of his chest, sort of thing, but kind of finding it funny at the time. So I managed to find that on the Thunderballs archive. But yeah, a lot of people think Vargas. So why Vargas?
It's really only because of that one line, right? That Largo says, he doesn't drink, he doesn't smoke, he doesn't make love.
Yeah.
What do you do, Vargas? That's the only thing really in the movie that you could count as asexual coding. Yeah.
And if I remember correctly, it's been a while since I've read this one, but I think Fleming uses the term in relation to Blofeld in Thunderball. I need to go back and check that one.
Yeah, but possibly.
I wonder if when they were adapting that, because obviously that was written kind of, as a screen treatment and whatever, I wonder if the asexuality sort of got passed on to Vargas in a way. I don't know. I need to check that one. Yeah, maybe. But that's probably one of the more obvious ones. But as you argue really, really well in your article, most of the time asexuals are not represented terribly positively, as goes for a lot of queer characters in Bond, particularly gay characters. but lesbian characters and bisexual characters, and we don't tend to get represented terribly positively.
No,
although one that I think people will actually find quite surprising, but the more you and I kind of sent this one back and forth, the more I sort of convinced myself of it. Paloma in No Time to Die. So could you unpack that one?
I mean, it is only one interpretation. You can interpret her behaviors several ways, but I did find it interesting watching her scenes. Only 15 minutes of screen time thereabouts, but the way she responds to Bond's little innuendos, she just responds very like, what are you talking about? No, thank you. That made me think, oh, okay, could that be construed as asexual or lesbian? But then she was walking around that Spectre party, and she watches this one guy sort of sensuously kiss a woman's hand, and she's sort of like, wow. She seems sort of perplexed by the whole scene. So yeah, I thought maybe you could read asexual into that. And I don't know how purposely it was done by the filmmakers, because I read the screenplay for No Time to Die, and it's not in there. So, no. But who knows? Maybe they had a conversation on set with the actress and decided to do it this way, or maybe I'm just reading too much into it.
Personally, I don't think you are at all. When I went back through that sequence, like frame by frame, to select the images for your article, everything you'd written about, it was so dead on. Certainly it's there in Ana de Armas's performance.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people will not think of Paloma as an asexual character because, Ana de Armas is something of a sex symbol, and because of what she's wearing, it's quite a sexualized outfit. And so, we've got this sex symbol in the movie, but her behavior is consistently asexually coded throughout the entire sequence. It's like she can't really understand why people would do those things in that scene and why Bond is reacting that way. It's like, no, I'm just telling you to take your clothes off so that you can change. Why would you think, I didn't give you any signals. What? Yeah, it's totally there in the performance throughout the whole sequence, I think.
Yeah, and if the year 2021, I guess, would be the year that they decided to actually put an asexual character like that in the film. So who knows? But there's definitely some coding there that you could read. Yeah.
I think you're spot on. The one that I think you probably connect with the most, another fairly good representation, I think, is Melina from For Your Eyes Only. So do you want to talk about Melina?
Yeah, I mean, I had always loved that movie. It's probably in my top 5. And writing this and researching this, I started to wonder if maybe one of the reasons is because Melina seems to be also fairly asexual. I had completely forgotten that she and Bond even kiss. I completely wiped that from my memory, but I went back and looked at it, and it's like, oh yes, they do kiss before they go swimming. But they only kiss in their very last scene, and then when Bond sort of, he seems to expect something to happen, and she says, let's go swimming, and that was sort of interesting. Like, oh, okay, he does seem surprised by that she offers to go swimming, and then it was funny when she disrobes and tells him For Your Eyes Only. You could read that 2 ways, and you could read it as it's for your eyes and not for your hands or
Oh,
your body.
yes.
That was interesting to me. I suddenly realized that. I was like, hey, that's funny. But I think that was probably not, on purpose by the filmmakers, I think.
But it's interesting how many Bond fans think that it's almost perfunctory that they presumably have sex at the end of that film, because the whole film doesn't really lead to that point. There's I think you referenced the sleigh ride, and there's the really romantic version of the theme tune, but actually the music is doing a lot of the selling of the romance in that. It's not actually terribly romantic, and the subsequent scene isn't terribly romantic either. So
no,
I know the convention is that, Bond get the St. George gets the princess at the end, whose reward for the mission and all that entails. But it's always struck me as a bit odd that they do get together at the end sexually.
I know. And it feels more like friendship, right? Throughout the movie. Yeah.
And again, when I was going through the Thunderballs archive to find some images and going through my own screen captures from For Your Eyes Only, I noticed that in a lot of the publicity photos, Roger Moore, and the actress's name has just gone out of my head, Carol Bouquet. Yeah, Bouquet. Yeah. Is that how you pronounce her surname? Bouquet. So I've always wondered, Bouquet bucket. But they are framed usually like friends, or people who are in a relationship, who are in quite a mature relationship, should we say, rather than people, that their hands aren't all over each other, like a lot of publicity photos of Bond and the Bond girls. So again, it might not have been intended, but there's definitely an interesting dynamic between those characters. And you mentioned in your article the shot in the casino, which has always intrigued me. There is that shot in the casino, which is just her turning around and him seeing her seeing Bond leave with Liesl.
Yeah.
And it's never explained why she's there or how she felt about that, except in a deleted scene, which I sent you the link to. So did you watch that deleted scene?
I watched it.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I didn't know that scene existed, but that explains why that plot thread was dropped eventually. But what did I think about it? I mean, it's a very short scene where Bond comes on board of her ship and she says, I tried to call you at your hotel, but you weren't there. And he says, well, I wasn't there last night. And then she says, I'm not interested in your sex life, Mr. Bond. That's interesting. I mean, could you read that as asexual? I mean, the intriguing part for me is how she plays it. I mean, she does seem very, hostile to him, and she calls him Mr. Bond and not James. So it's, she does seem quite jealous. But that could just be her romantic attraction to him, and her worrying that if he's sleeping with someone else, then maybe he is also romantically attracted to someone else and not to her. So you could still read it as asexual. I don't know.
I actually think it's a really good job that they left that scene out of the movie.
Yeah,
sometimes you watch the deleted scene and you think, but John Glenn himself says, and it's not entirely clear what he means by this, but John Glenn himself says of that deleted scene, it takes something away from her character. And it's not clear what he's taken away, but for me, it does take away some of that asexual possibility. I think this whole sexual jealousy thing, it's not fitting for the character.
No.
It's like, she sees him go off with Liesl, but actually she doesn't care. In the film that we have, it's like, well, he's living his own life, he's getting the mission completed, whatever. And I really think it would have damaged her character if they'd left that scene in the film.
Yeah, well, the deleted scene sort of makes her seem petty about it.
Yeah.
And I think you could argue that she is upset when she sees
Mm,
him leaving the
mm.
casino, but at the same time, she gets over it pretty quickly, I think. Yeah.
You know how I read that scene now? Um, because Bond doesn't know he's walking in. Well, he does sort of know he does know he's walking into a trap, but it could
Mhm.
turn out really, really badly. I almost imagine that Melina is following. And this would be a great scene that they could have shot, where Melina follows them and she's almost protecting him. She's almost like he's, guardian angel in that scene. So it's like if he ends up going off with her and she's a villain and he gets into trouble, I'm going to be the one I'm going to have to save him. So
That could be cool.
that's how I always
Mm.
interpret that scene. I think she's there not to be the jealous lover, but she's there to be his protector. That's the only version in my head that sort of works anyway.
Sure. Yeah. That could be. Yeah. With her crossbow. Yeah. That could
So I'm
work.
hoping this article, opens people's minds to further possibilities, because that's what I always try to do, really. And a lot of times Bond movies are really careful about spelling things out exactly, and you do sort of have to read between the lines. But sometimes people have to be kind of encouraged to kind of see alternative possibilities rather than just kind of heteronormative kind of stuff. So do you think we're going to be inundated with people telling us about other asexual characters? Which ones do you think people might kind of want to go away and have another look at?
Ooh, I don't know. I mean, I hope I missed a lot of characters, and that people can tell me, hey, did you look at this? And there are so many characters you can interpret. I mean, I did debate Desmond Llewellyn's Q. That could be really cool, even though there is that scene at the end of Octopussy where
Yes.
he lands in the hot air balloon and he's surrounded by all these women, and he does seem slightly intrigued by that, but that always struck me as sort of out of character for him. I don't
And
believe that.
and that dialogue where he says, "Oh, maybe later," or
Yeah, yeah,
whatever
yeah.
things, that dialogue seems like it's been looped in afterwards, maybe
Maybe,
as a bit of
yeah.
an afterthought. I'm not sure that was necessarily intended, or it was if it's there in the scene, I need to rewatch it, see if Desmond Llewellyn's lips are moving or not. But it seems like a bit of an afterthought. He's almost like, don't fuss with me. Yeah, he's always, and he
Yeah.
never approves of Bond's romantic entanglements. I mean, even though in the novels it's sort of M who always has that role of really being disapproving about Bond's womanizing, but Q isn't like a proper character in the novels.
Mm.
So I think in the films they kind of took that. What about M? Do you think M might be?
Sure, yeah. If you could read Q that way, why not M? Because the same thing goes for M. M is always focused on the mission, and
Yeah.
although there is that scene in From Russia with Love, I think, where Moneypenny starts mentioning an interesting evening that James Bond and M had in, what was it, Tokyo or something?
Tokyo, yeah.
And
Well
he
remembered,
stopped he
yeah.
stops the tape machine. But who knows what that means? You could read him as asexual, sure.
Absolutely. Okay. Or somewhere on the spectrum. And I think that's probably the most important thing for people to
Yeah.
realize, isn't it? It's not there's no one size fits all here. It's a range of identities. So, Fenna, thank you very much for your time. Thank you even more for your amazing article, which I know a lot of people are going to find really interesting when it goes out. So, any kind of Bond projects planned this year for the 60th anniversary? Are you planning to do anything or watch anything or see people or anything?
Not yet, but if you visit Amsterdam, we should definitely meet
Oh,
up.
that would definitely be a good idea. And maybe we can go to Tiffany Casey's apartment.
Yeah.
Maybe we can find it together.
We should. Let's do that.